Welcome to Charmed Anatomy of an Episode, where we dissect the episodes from one of the greatest TV shows ever made and see just what makes them great.
We almost died going back to the past. This is not something that you just do.
Today we focus on Morality Bites, which is the second episode of Season 2 and widely considered one of the best across the whole series.
When we went back to the 70s, we saw ourselves as kids, and now we'll be seeing ourselves walking around 10 years older.
I already said that I wasn't the biggest fan of Season 2, but even I'm with the majority on this one. Morality Bites is in my top 10 for absolute certain. So what's it about?
That is so rude. He's just gonna walk away.
Then don't let him. Use your magic.
The Halliwells are having trouble with a neighbourhood dog walker who keeps letting his little pest treat their driveway like a fire hydrant. So Phoebe is feeling rebellious and encourages her sisters to teach him a lesson with their powers.
Nice shot.
After this, she receives a premonition of herself 10 years into the future being burned at the stake while Prue and Piper watch. So they travel forward in time to 2009, and unlike when they went back to 1975, here they actually assume the bodies of their future selves.
Well, apparently going to the past isn't the same as going to the future.
Prue is now a super successful girl boss who owns Buckland's auction house,
And 3 more, Paris, Tokyo, and London.
but has become a ruthless tyrant with no time for anything but work. Piper has an adorable little daughter called Melinda, and Leo is the father, but they have been married and divorced already, and he kind of hates the sisters' guts now.
Leo, I'm so glad you're here. I have so many...
Phoebe is in jail for murder, and the barbecue she saw in her vision was a government-ordered execution, helmed by a man named Nathaniel Pratt, who has found out about magic and is persecuting witches. I got chills just reading that.
I love the smell of burnt witch in the morning.
Fun fact, Charmed was unique among many other shows of its time for having the opening credits only bill the regulars who appeared in the episode, meaning you'd get a different credit sequence depending on who was there. Morality Bites features none of the supporting cast, no Daryl, Dan or Jenny. Leo is featured, but Brian Krause wouldn't be promoted to regular until later this season. So Morality Bites is the only episode of the whole series where just the sisters appear in the opening credits. That's pretty neat.
We were sent here for a reason. Maybe not to stop this, like what we thought.
Morality Bites is one of those episodes that manages to do just about everything right, and it became increasingly rare later in the season for there to be storylines involving no antagonists, examining what it meant to have the charmed powers, and going for a very character-driven story that also had a well-executed plot.
We don't even know what we're like in this time, Prue, let alone what we think.
I mean, alternate realities and what-if scenarios are always great to watch because of the places they can bring the characters to. My favourite Buffy episode is The Wish, and Charmed follows a similar formula, although not nearly as dark, of course.
You trusting fool! How do you know the other world is any better than this?
Because it has to be.
The show would often have episodes or even arcs where one or two sisters would take prominence, but it always had a good balance of giving everyone their time.
My sister?
Right, sorry. Almost forgot you had another one. I mean, other than...
Morality Bites juggles 3 different sets of motivations and character development very well, and you come away from it feeling each sister got enough focus. Prue's storyline I find especially resonant in today's world.
What is it? What's wrong?
I have no one to say goodbye to.
First of all, another fun fact. We all know that Shannon Doherty starred in the classic dark comedy Heathers.
No way!
She was asked to dye her hair blonde for that, so that all 3 Heathers could match, but she refused and going red was a compromise. So now we get to see her as a blonde, which, I mean, gorgeousness speaks for itself.
And you're blonde. Yeah, strange.
But anyway, millennials and Gen Z are constantly trying to grapple with what success looks like. In recent years, there has been a huge pushback against the pressure put on young people to already be social media stars, entrepreneurs, or something big before the big 3-0 comes. And as a society, we constantly glorify crunch culture, where pulling all-nighters or sacrificing rest and time with friends or family is something to be applauded. The negative effects that this kind of overworking can have on physical and mental health are usually glossed over in favour of platitudes like no pain, no gain. But here are 2 countering platitudes I think we all should live by. A. Rest is not a reward, it's a necessity. And B. Work smarter, not harder.
What's happened to me?
Prue's storyline in this episode examines what it means to be successful.
I don't just work at Buckland's, I own it.
She's an independent girl boss who owns 4 auction houses worldwide, has a team of assistants and a fancy limo, and is thoroughly depressed when she realizes that's all. No husband, no family, barely any contact with her sisters, and happy to F others over to get ahead.
Your sister was amazing. I mean, at first the board was a little resistant, what with the layoffs it would entail, but Prue pushed it through.
And although this obviously couldn't have been on the writers' minds, the 2009 setting means that Prue is laying people off in the wake of the 2008 recession.
Look at me. All right, I am booked with work. I'm about to lay off countless people with a flick of my pen, no man to speak of. Maybe you're just picky.
The episode does play the female success at the cost of a man trope, but it does so far better than a more famous girl boss drama from a few years later. I mean, Prue is upset that she isn't married, or at least with someone in the future, but it's not just that.
They didn't even know who you were at the office, my own sister.
Family and protecting innocence were always the biggest priorities for Prue, and what upsets her the most is that her assistant only knows she has sisters because one's about to be publicly executed, and that she would happily ruin other people's lives to get ahead. So the lack of husband and children is just another extension of what upsets her the most about what she's become.
If we die tonight, my tombstone will read, "Here lies Prue, she worked hard."
This builds off how the second half of season 1 saw her clashing with senior people at Buckland's after Rex and Hannah, and how she used her work to escape dealing with Andy's death in the previous episode, and it sows the seeds for the middle of the season, where she decides she can no longer compromise her morals to be successful in business, and leaves the corporate world to become a freelancer. And in fact, the essence of Prue's character at the start of the series was a residual bitterness for all she's had to sacrifice in life, with even her job choices in season 1 being about trying to keep the manor in the family.
Look, the only reason Piper and I gave up our apartment and moved back here was because this house has been our family for generations.
And part of her series-wide character development is how becoming a witch allows her the freedom to take back control of her life. So even if this episode is standalone, you could argue that it's pretty significant for her character, showing her the path she could be headed in if she continues to do what's expected of her, rather than what she wants.
You know, we can still make the good things happen, Piper. We just have to make the right choices.
Piper's storyline is also a big highlight, and it touches on themes that would be expanded on later in the series when she has children for real.
Our grandmother did it to us for protection.
You don't have to bind her powers, Piper.
The second last episode of season 1 laid the groundwork for what would be a lengthy forbidden romance storyline between her and Leo, and here we get shown a future scenario where it didn't work out.
Were we happy? Just for a little while, were we happy?
What I love about this particular plot is that there's so much left unsaid, but the writing already speaks to a story that's been played out quite strongly and passionately that we can feel everything unspoken.
We, tried to make it work with our powers.
Unfortunately, it's not as solid as it might have been because of a certain performer.
I can't do that.
Look, we know Brian Krause would eventually get good and have his time, but at this point...
You haven't kissed me like that since...
Since this morning, 1999, remember?
Even so, despite how much I disliked the love triangle that would unfold throughout this season, here in this early episode, they mapped out a rock-solid foundation for why it would happen.
This is always going to be a problem for us, isn't it?
Piper loves Leo. That was already proven when she was able to heal him in Love Hurts. But sometimes, love isn't enough.
Does that mean you clipped your wings for me?
No.
Piper and Leo's relationship is a massive conflict of interest in both their destinies, and this episode outright shows her a future where they tried to make it work and couldn't.
Wait, you were married?
Was.
Lack of love wasn't the problem here, and at this point in the series, Piper has had the most bad experiences with supernatural love interests, and it's reasonable that she would start thinking her relationship with Leo could go the same way. Dan Gordon would then represent the safe, seemingly healthy alternative to a more unpredictable man whose future with her would always be uncertain. And all too right for the one Halliwell who is defined by her desire to have a normal life.
What we always do.
Talk about it later.
You could argue that Piper is the one who forgets the lesson of this episode, or at least takes the longest for it to sink in.
What do you look for in a woman?
What do I look for?
She spends the season entertaining the safe, easy option, only later learning to listen to her heart and take the risk with Leo. So that's a major step in her transition from timid middle sister who settles for the safe option to fearless witch who fights for what she really wants. And now we get to Phoebe. Sadly, Alyssa Milano gives the weakest performance in an episode that requires a lot from her. Maybe she was just tired the day they were filming these scenes.
I was being executed. Burned alive.
But that doesn't diminish what I feel is still some pretty significant writing for her character.
We can't use our magic just to teach him or anybody else a lesson.
Why not?
From the get-go, Phoebe was the sister who loved being a witch and relished the idea of being able to get what she wants and have things her way. But while Phoebe was always the most self-centered of the sisters, she was also the first one to put herself at risk to help an innocent.
No! Wait!
Her very first premonition leads to her getting into an accident to save 2 children. Morality Bites brings those 2 attributes into conflict.
What did Phoebe do?
6 months ago, she, killed a man.
As it turns out, the reason she's wanted for murder is because her victim was a killer himself.
Because he murdered someone. Someone Phoebe cared about very much.
And because she didn't like the verdict, she decided to take the law into her own hands.
She used her power to kill Green, got caught, and her magic exposed by Nathaniel Pratt.
So Phoebe's selfishness overrode her sense of justice and convinced her that's what she was serving out. And the lesson for her plot in this episode is the following.
He was evil. He deserved what... Wrong thing done for the right reason, still the wrong thing.
Because of using her powers for her own desires, knowing there would be personal gain consequences, hundreds of other innocent witches are suffering because of one woman's pain. Marvel didn't cop this until very recently themselves, allowing Wanda to dodge consequences until now just because she felt sad.
What's about to happen? This is me being reasonable.
Yes, stopping mass mental enslavement is a noble sacrifice because she's just so sad, guys.
You break the rules and become a hero. I do it and I become the enemy. That doesn't seem fair.
I love that the episode doesn't let Phoebe off the hook for this.
Nobody's gonna rescue you.
What she did was cold-blooded murder. Rather than using her powers to expose the killer or solve things non-violently, she resorted to Charmed-style assassination. She would gain empath powers in Season 6, which also allowed her to channel the magic of others, since powers in this universe are tied to people's emotions, and it was a common fan theory that the magic she used to kill Cal Green came from her empath powers. A one-shot comic would confirm this when it revisited this plot point, even revealing that the friend Cal murdered was Elise Rothman, her eventual boss at the Bay Mirror. So in a very dramatic twist, after we've got a really fun sequence of Prue and Piper using magic to break into the prison, we discover that the premonition Phoebe saw was brought on by her admitting that her future self does deserve to die for her crimes.
Why you have to let this happen?
She doesn't give future Phoebe a way out or loophole.
Our job is to protect the innocent, not punish the guilty.
She has to give up her chance of guaranteed survival and let herself burn at the stake. All because she betrayed everything she stood for and wanted to face the consequences.
It has to end with me.
Yes, there's a happy ending where the sisters are restored to the past, but Phoebe will now forever remember the feeling of being burned alive as a lesson to not abuse her gifts again.
This is where it all started. The first time we used our magic for revenge.
It's a lesson she forgets in Season 6, unfortunately, and gets punished again, but overall, this episode reminds anyone who loves Phoebe as a character precisely why that is. And before the credits roll, we're given one final twist.
Pratt.
Nathaniel Pratt, the future witch hunter, was the very dog walker the sisters punished at the start.
Our little act of revenge might have been what sent Pratt on his path to seek his own.
Phoebe then delivers another important lesson.
Once you break the small rules, it's just a matter of time before the big ones are next.
And I honestly stand by that.
We all have a lot of changes to make if we want to avoid ending up where we just came from.
So to recap why we love this episode, a uniquely antagonist-free story that brings all 3 sisters' characters in interesting directions, a morality tale that doesn't let the protagonists off the hook too easily, some fun teasers of what the sisters' powers look like in the future, as well as world building that makes me wish this bad future could have been a season-long storyline.
Alright, these people are in danger because of the witch trials she started.
How?
And of course, a heavy emphasis on the strength of sisterhood the way only this show could do best.
Hey, the future was an OMAD. You were like Miss Fortune 500, and I had a beautiful little girl.
What?
Details later.
Had season 2 continued as powerfully as it started and delivered more episodes of this quality, well, we can dream.
How'd you do?
But if a fellow fan ever refers to classic Charmed, it's ones like this I definitely think of.
A very smart girl once told me that we're supposed to protect the innocent, not punish the guilty. I haven't told you yet.
Now maybe you won't have to.